Hello, everyone. Welcome to this virtual live session brought to you by People Matters in association with Pearson. I am Rachel Reynosa, Senior Editor at People Matters, and it's my privilege to welcome you all to this exciting session. I would like to thank each one of you for taking time out to join us for the launch of the exclusive research study titled 2022 Power Skills Survey Asia Pacific. As we all know, many organizations are still assessing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their growth plans. We are faced with a critical period in which HR leaders must sharpen their talent strategy. One of the critical components of this remains the game plan for skills development. This means knowing which skills will drive the future of work and which competencies will underpin successful teams, no matter how much the world around us changes. It also means that learning strategies will play a significant role in the business plan of any organization, and they will be a key differentiating factor when it comes to performing and underperforming organizations. The 2022 Power Skills Report is based on expert interviews, along with a survey of 180 companies in the Asia Pacific region, and it's packed with valuable insights. For our audience, a quick housekeeping reminder before we start today's session. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to use the chat window. We will bring them up towards the end of the session during the 15-minute segment for questions and answers. So stay tuned and keep posting those questions. Now, I would like to invite our speakers. We have the pleasure of welcoming Vaclav Koranda, former Vice President of Human Resources at T-Systems Malaysia. Vaclav was born in the Czech Republic. He has more than 20 years of experience in the field of human resources. He got his first HR director role at a relatively early age of 27. Since then, he has held several executive roles in the area of human resources, namely in the information and communication technology industry in Europe and Asia. Vaclav holds a master's degree in work and organizational psychology from Charles University in Prague. In 2018, he received a CHRO of the Year award from the Employer Branding Institute in India. In 2019, he was named one of 101 Global HR Heroes by the World HRD Congress in Mumbai. He also received the HR Leader 2019 award from the Malaysian Institute of Human Resource Management. Welcome, Vaclav. It's great to have you with us.
Hello, hello. Hi, Rachel. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I wish everyone probably good afternoon because I assume the majority of the participants come from the CEA region. I'm actually right now in my home country in Europe, so it's early morning for me. So in case you're joining from Europe like me, good morning. And I believe we have some participants from Australia as well, and they might have evening already. So good day wherever you are, and my great pleasure and honor to be here with you.
So good morning, Vaclav.
Thank you.
We also welcome Greg Miller, co-founder of Faethm and Senior Vice President Customer at Pearson Workforce Skills. Greg is the co-founder of the award-winning AI scale-up Faethm, and post-acquisition by Pearson, he is now Senior Vice President of the Global Customer Business for Pearson's Workforce Skills Division. Greg's 27-year career in the IT industry has spanned Silicon Valley startups and Australasian multinationals. Previously, Greg worked at SAP, where he held the role of Chief Operating Officer. Prior to that, Greg held several senior roles at Unisys, PeopleSoft, and Siebel Systems across the Asia Pacific region. Welcome, Greg, and it's great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It's great to be here, and it is approaching the evening hours here in Sydney. Cheers.
So it's a good early evening? So without further delay, I invite Greg to launch the study and take us through the key insights. To our audience, stay tuned throughout the session to receive a copy of the exclusive report. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Rachel. Really appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to be here with you today to launch the 2022 Power Skills Survey for Asia Pacific. So we'll get into it. I'm going to kind of jump through, give you a couple of the highlights from the report itself, and then look forward to discussing some of that with Vaclav after we do so. I think, as I dug in and read through the entire report over the last week or so, something that really resonated with me was that, I suppose, whilst the report was specific to organizations in Asia Pac, we're not necessarily alone. I've seen similar but differing or nuanced impacts across the globe and all the organizations that we've worked with across Europe, the US, the Americas, and Asia Pacific. So I guess there is some solace in knowing that we can work with our colleagues around the world to share best practice and how we overcome some of the challenges in what we've seen. Challenges brought on, I think, some of what you alluded to, Rachel, the unparalleled level of disruption that we're seeing with close to 30 million occupations, jobs, people being potentially disrupted from emerging technology alone across the Asia Pacific region at a time when the pandemic is driving us to a state of remote working, hybrid working. We're seeing these this large scale resignations happening as people are opting out of the workforce. We're seeing the impact of climate change as organizations move from brown energy, and nations for that matter, move from brown energy to green energy, and how do they help their workforce make that same transition? So a load of change happening and disruption, but at the same time, we're all expected to keep growing, right? No one's taking their foot off the you must keep growing in your organization, keep innovating. So quite a challenge for HR professionals, learning and development professionals around the world, and can't wait to hear what Vaclav has to say about that, being one of those professionals. But let me jump in and I'll share some of those findings to give you a sense for what you'll be getting as you download the report after our session today. So I've pulled up my screen. I think you're all seeing that. But let's just jump into it. I've got about 6 top or key findings I want to get you across, and then we can move on to the panel. Rachel already took you through the scale of this exercise. 180 organizations across 10 countries in Asia Pacific, pretty much all industries represented, and a large breadth of size of organizations as well. But one of the first highlights or first points we wanted to discuss was related to the kind of post-pandemic impacts. I know this is a somewhat challenging thing to say, but at a time when we see so much bad news, it's often nice to see that there might be some positives out of things like the pandemic. And one of those, I've talked to many CHROs and L&D professionals that have said, hey, we always knew skilling was important, but the budgets were often one of the first to get shrunk or heaven forbid cut. But now executive teams were actually refocusing on learning programs, many future of work programs, learning programs, new skilling programs, getting the funding they need, getting approval from the C-level in organizations. So we've seen this post-pandemic shift to not only recognize the need for it, but actually back that up. And you can see on the next slide, the same holds true for the investment, not just in time and resources, but also in dollars. So it's good to see this shift in not just thinking about the importance of skills, but backing it up, and organizations putting the dollars and the people behind it to make sure that it comes to fruition. Now, the third trend is an interesting one, I think, in many aspects. So what we see here, the kind of skills that have seen the highest level of demand post-pandemic, and those we have dubbed these power skills. And what you'll notice right off the bat is many of them are what we've traditionally maybe referred to as those soft skills. Leadership, collaboration, adaptability, the ability to continuously learn and adapt through change, digital fluency, and critical thinking. We may have always known these were important. At least over the past 5 years, I've seen that shift. But now we see the actual heightened demand for these skills post-pandemic. Something I wanted to call out specifically from a Faethm perspective in terms of what we've done over the last 5 years, I thought was incredibly empowering. We have modeled what are the skills, the capabilities that are effectively future-proof, meaning no technology, no robot can displace. And these are, in fact, the truly human attributes, things like critical thinking and agile leadership, things like digital and data literacies. So it's really interesting for me to see that the 180 organizations that we surveyed, they've come forward and said, hey, these in fact are the most in-demand skills. And lo and behold, they are those that actually, if you have these skills, you will remain future-proof. You will remain employable. You won't be part of that organization that's displaced when the CIO brings in these emerging technologies they need to innovate and stay competitive. So I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition to see the survey results against what we're seeing in the Faethm data as well. The fourth trend I wanted to highlight, interestingly, is this move from soft to not so hard skills, right? How important these soft skills are becoming. And I thought I'd highlight that in something we're also seeing in the market. I've seen a huge amount of discussion over things like, say, data science, and organizations over investing in the need to bring on more data science and the technical skills, the hard skills that those data scientists need. Now, there was a point in time where that was a very true reality, and we needed to bring on those skills, and they were very difficult to find as well. But what that demand and difficulty to find has led to is one of the biggest investments in IT startups in the world. So much dollars are being thrown at investments in effectively automating the tasks and functions of a data scientist, that role actually in the longer horizon will shrink, because we will have technologies come on board that will take those tasks away. They will displace those tasks necessary. So the reality of the need for soft skills, the ability for people to interpret the data, to tell stories and visualize the data rather than write the code to come up with the data, is another example of this shift to softer skills over hard. The fifth trend we highlighted here is that relating to communication. So we saw that in the power skills, communication in the workplace remains quite powerful and important. Now, that is always underpinned, of course, by a proficiency in language. But what we're seeing, this juxtaposition of that need, that demand for communication levels increasing, but we're also seeing not quite the matching investment in things like language skill measurement. The measurement of English language, for example, things like the skilling and the strategies and the technology that we need to drive that increase in capability in language skills. So yes, we see the demand and the importance of it and the ratings across the different levels in the organization, but we're not quite seeing that match with the investment in what we need to create that environment and that capability across the organization. And the last trend I wanted to share with you, number 6 here, I found interesting because I was in a recent conversation with the chief learning officer at Verizon. And the conversation we had, I think, underpins a lot of what you're seeing here in these kind of 4 key callouts or roadblocks. And the way she addressed those was first and foremost with data. Having the necessary data to understand where my workforce is today, to be able to map what my skill levels are today across the organization so that I know the gaps towards my future state. If I don't have that baseline, it's really difficult for me to put the programs in place to move forward. So number 1 on her list was having a data-driven decision-making process. Number 2 is understanding the now so that I can move to that future state. So being able to look 2, 3, 5 years down the horizon to know where I'm going. But the last thing, I think one of the most important when we see some of these roadblocks around budgeting and getting programs underway was connecting learning outcomes to business outcomes, the business strategy. And in fact, that's where she said, before she did anything, she mapped the business strategy to the learning outcomes they needed to create. Then she got the data necessary to drive the programs and get those approvals from the C-level to execute against that strategy. So very interesting. If you haven't looked her up, Lou Tedrick at Verizon is a pretty powerful lady. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what you'll be getting in the report. Obviously, that's just kind of a quick 6 top trends and snapshot. There's a ton of data behind that in the report and an expansion on all that, as well as some really interesting insights from HR leaders in large organizations across the Asia Pac region who all contributed to the report itself. A very powerful read and hopefully one that will empower the activities you have to tackle and market. And just some key takeaways yet again here, just to reinforce, we are seeing this dramatic increase post-pandemic in soft skills. We've called out some of those top levels. And I think the critical next step for many organizations is to be able to assess the workforce, diagnose where I have the workforce today in terms of their capability, where I need to get to so I can see the gaps, and then put the business case in place to go and execute against those programs. So thank you so much for your time. Rachel, I'll hand it back to you to get us into some of the fun with Vaclav and some of the questions that have come from our audience.
Thanks, Greg. Let's begin our panel discussion. My opening question is actually for both of you. In the past 2 years, we've seen, the rapid transformation of workspaces. And because of that, there's also a shift in the demand for certain skills. In light of that, what are some of the skilling trends you believe would have an impact specifically on the Southeast Asian market in the coming months? So let's have Vaclav kick us off.
Sure. Great presentation, Greg. I hope I won't repeat what you have just said, because what I can see in the Southeast Asian market is actually no different from the rest of the world. And I assume have mentioned there are 2 big drivers behind the skill shift, and one is automation and the other one is digitization, and they sort of go hand in hand. So on one hand, I can see a push towards digital related skills. Once we start working with robots and digitize our processes, we need our workforce to be able to work with these robots and be able, instead of doing the actual work, which was the focus in the past, they have to be able to actually manage the robots. And like in a factory, instead of, mounting some screws, you have to be able to actually program and tweak the robot that is doing the work. So it's going to be similar. So skills like all these scripting languages and automation tools. I come mainly from the IT background, so it might be a bit different in other industries, but these kind of skills will be prominent in the near future for sure. And the other one is data related skills, because we have to be able to work with the outputs of the machines and with the digitized processes. So anything related to data analytics, big data, and so on will be highly in demand. And I can see that data is going to play a very big role in across all industries and in all departments. So, and then the other side of the coin is that if we want to stay relevant, as employees want to stay relevant in the process, they have to focus on the skills that can't be sort of digitized or programmed to be done by a robot. So anything related to, I would say, emotional intelligence rather than soft skills, because I can see that the machines are taking over more and more of the space in which we work. It used to be that in the 19th century the steam engine took over the physical, or started to take over the physical work, and then with the invention of computers, the machines got into the cognitive space. So we are only left with the emotional sort of intelligence, which is still reserved to humans. And soft skills actually fit into that category largely, I would say. So these are definitely the trends that are shaping the future of learning and development nowadays.
Yeah. Thank you, Vaclav. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and thanks, Vaclav. You've probably stolen my thunder, but no, that's definitely I would agree with you 100%. So maybe I'll take another angle at this. You mentioned workspaces, Rachel, which I think is an interesting word in this discussion, because what we're seeing are the transformations that are happening to the workforce is actually then dictating changes and transformation to the workspace that we actually work within. So we've seen a post-pandemic shift in a need for the ability to remotely work, and therefore adding things like phrases like digital in front of communication and digital in front of collaboration, because suddenly for many people this is new and ways of working are new. We're seeing, I think, a shift to, not every organization, but I've definitely met plenty of organizations shifting, and my own, by the way, to a hybrid working environment. Am I going in 1 day a week, 2 days a week? And so when I do go in, it's not necessarily to go in and sit at a desk and work on my emails as I used to, right? It's a different need for space. And understanding, again, back to the point on data, being able to understand what level of remote productivity can I achieve across every worker, then enables me to say, okay, well, that worker can actually be remote for 4 of their 5 days a week, or for 60% of their time. Now I say, but I can't be 100% productive for that worker or that occupation, because some of the tasks need to be with their colleagues or in a different environment. So I know that, then I can identify the 2 days or 1 day that worker needs to be in the office, let's say. And I can also identify what they need when they're there. It isn't a desk. It's a collaboration environment. It's a very different looking space, so that I come in and work with my agile team, and we get those tasks done that I can't do remotely. Now I'm 100% productive. So that's an important shift, and requires a connection to real estate planners, as well as managers, to get their own heads around that they have to be okay with not seeing their workers every day, and how they manage teams remotely has changed. So this isn't easy. This doesn't come naturally for many, because they've been rooted in a routine and the ways of working for decades that we're now kind of throwing up in the air and starting afresh. So I think it's a really interesting word in this discussion, that workspace, that we're seeing equally transform as we do the workforce.
Thanks for differentiating and kind of like expanding that difference in in the concepts. Now, I just want to go back to the results of the report. And I know some of the top or the most in demand skills since the pandemic have been leadership, collaboration, and as Vaclav mentioned earlier, there's that need for digital and data fluency. Now, it's one thing to have those almost technical skills, like understanding how data and even managing robots work, and then also having that emotional intelligence of building your team around you still, even if you're in a remote environment or in a hybrid work environment. So I just wanted to highlight that for those who will read the report, you will see that those top skills are actually resonating across the Asia Pacific. So thank you guys. Um, I'm moving on to my second question. This is for Vaclav specifically. Now, there's this increased conversation on how soft skills are the power skills that companies need. Maybe we could also go into defining what do we mean by power skills anyway. Given how soft skills are a critical element of talent assessment, talent management at T Systems Malaysia, what were some of the strategies that helped you and your team in overcoming challenges challenges to how you would take this agenda forward? Vaclav?
Yeah, I maybe if I may say so, I have seen some of the intercultural differences, in the Southeast Asian region and elsewhere in the world, because my former company was headquartered in Germany and was largely centered around European customers with a global footprint. And there are certain differences in a way how people do things in Southeast Asia or in Asia in general and in the West. That's a fact. And we had to recognize that phenomena and work with it in order to be successful in serving our customers around the world. And large part of this was to train certain soft skills or to train them in a certain way how to deal with certain soft skills or how to behave in certain situations and so on. So what we did was we implemented a so-called 10-80-10 skilling strategy several years ago. It was actually not only related to soft skills, but to all the skills we needed at that point of time. And with that, we identified like the 10% of the skills in across the whole company, which we regarded after some elaborate deliberation and discussion in the management as becoming obsolete. Then 80% of the skills that we consider to be core, and we want to keep them for the future. And then 10% of the skills which we don't have, but we anticipate the customers to require that sort of skills in, let's say, 2-3 years time. And in this 10%, we would invest and identify a group of people that would be trained in the skills in anticipation what the market wants. And the soft skills were always a part of that. So we every year we identified a certain group of soft skills we wanted the workforce to be trained in. And then we ran an extensive program. It was always like 2-3 months in the middle of the year, and basically 3/4 of the workforce always went through this extensive program every year, and they were trained the soft skills we felt we were lacking or we were needing at that point of time. So it was quite extensive. I have to say it was also quite successful in a sense that we could see a positive reaction, improvement in the customer satisfaction survey in the areas where we saw a gap previously, and it also led to being better able to acquire new business in the region.
Thanks, Vaclav. Now for Greg, you know that having the right learning culture would only be the first step to building up your L&D strategy. But sustaining it is equally critical for organizations. What are some of the key areas for learning and development leaders when it comes to building the sustainability of their learning programs?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, interesting question, because I have hosted a series of roundtables recently where we had CHROs in a room, and one of the common themes from them was, how do I get my business case approved for strategic workforce planning, for the technology, for the services, for the people I need to execute full-blown strategic workforce planning, which includes upskilling and reskilling of our people in particular. And so, interestingly, I think the comment I made at the opening regarding my chief learning officer at Verizon hold true here as well. And actually more recently had it from a major healthcare provider in the US, a brand that we would all know and recognize if you heard it. Their CHRO, when we met, she said to me, I asked her what was the key program objective she was after, and she said, "Oh, my number one goal is revenue growth." And I said, "Wow, that's impressive. I don't often hear CHROs tell me that." But I think the key here was she had connected with the business strategy, and that's what I was referring to before at Verizon, connecting the learning strategy to the business strategy, connecting the people strategy to the business strategy first and foremost, to ensure that you never again see your funding cut as it pertains to that learning program. So I think that's a critical step. A CHRO of a healthcare organization realizing that to grow revenues, I need to open up new facilities. To open up new facilities, I need more nurses. To get more nurses, I need more training programs, because there aren't enough young people coming through and fulfilling the demand for nursing. So a really interesting train of thought and program that connected the business strategy of revenue growth to the people strategy and people needs to generate and to train and skill more nurses in the environment. So yeah, connecting business strategy, I think, is critical.
Great point, Greg. Going back to Vaclav, so we're seeing this concept now of almost like borderless hiring, where you can source talent everywhere, and with that we end up with a global workforce. Because of that, we also see English becoming an important driver of communication within the workspace. What are some of the best ways of implementing communication skills at a massive scale and at all levels of your organization?
Well, if you ask me how to teach all the employees English, I have some experience with that, and I have to say that the best way how to do this is to hire people who can speak English. I don't have much hope in hiring people who can't speak the language and then trying to teach them the language. Actually, only there's a small percentage of people in the population that are they have some sort of a linguistic talent, and they can learn any language at any point of time. But the majority of people can only learn a foreign language or a language in general when they are babies, when they are young. And if they don't start learning the language when they're young, then there's very little chance that they will reach proficiency at the level we need in a working environment. And we have tried it with English, and we have tried it with German, because our company is headquartered in Germany, so there was a certain need for German-speaking skills as well. That's a simple solution. Hire people who can speak English, and you can support that skill, of course. And I would highly recommend that with even online learning tools nowadays. I have seen some amazing tools that support online language learning in different languages, but predominantly in English. And the technology can nowadays recognize your voice, so it can correct your pronunciation and so on. So very interesting tools, but it requires not only certain linguistic capabilities from on the learner side, but also I would say some volition skills or aptitudes, because all these tools are mainly self-paced. The online tools. I mean, you can have a tutor for sure, someone on Skype teaching you English, but then the cost side is going to be quite heavy. And again, I think not many people are able to do that on their own. Like I would say, like 10% of the population, maybe, according to my private estimate, are like self-learners, and the rest just they need support. They need someone to teach them. So these are the limitations. In terms of communication skills in general, I think can be taught as any other soft skill, and that's more of sort of technique rather than skill. And it's becoming more and more important in all organizations nowadays, especially with what Greg said at the beginning about remote working and hybrid working. It comes with additional and new challenges regarding communication, management, leadership, and so on, engagement also.
So I'm imagining the first step to having a linguistically proficient or like a workforce that has the communication skills that the business needs is to start with people who already have those foundational skills and to build off of those with training programs.
Yes, exactly. And that probably brings us to the education system. And I can already see a question from the audience that is pointing towards that direction as well. And this has been, I mean, I have some 22 plus years experience, and I've started working with the education system in my home country and then in Southeast Asia at a very early stage of my career. And it's not an easy journey, because the education system behaves more or less like a business. They basically, they're teaching things that the students want, or sometimes more what their parents want, because it's the parents who make the decision. And there you have the generation problem there, and it's sort of like perception marketing kind of a thing. So they're not always teaching skills that we can use as employers, or that we need as employers. And this has been constantly a discussion, or sometimes even a battle. And other things play a role as well. The teachers would like they have their own KPIs and metrics, and they want their school to be the best, and the best means to achieve certain things, certain KPIs, which they follow, but that might be not necessarily related to what we want as businesses and as sort of recipients of their products. So there's sort of a disconnect there, and it's an interesting topic. But yeah, I think, I mean, we have as a my parent company is actually a Deutsche Telekom, which is a German incumbent telecom provider, and it used to be a state-owned organization with a lot of public servants, and none of them could speak English. And when they privatized the company in the 90s and they decided to venture into IT, it was a bit of a problem, and there was a huge push over 10 years trying to teach the people English, but I would say was only partly successful.
Thanks, Vaclav. For Greg, you've shared your views on sustainable learning and development programs. Of course, we think about this as like driving impact in the long term. It's one of the key agenda of a good learning and development program. So with that in mind, how can skilling programs focused on soft skills align with building up a future-ready workforce?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot lately about this concept of sustainable automation. So an organization with a philosophy and a strategy that says, yes, I am going to innovate. Yes, I am going to implement new technologies to be competitive and successful and grow. But when I do so, I'm going to identify the jobs that may be impacted, that might be augmented by those technologies, or fully displaced and automated by those technologies. So I'll get ahead of that impact. I'll identify the workers being impacted, and I will decide who's going on a reskilling pathway, who's going on an upskilling pathway, in order to keep those individuals that are impacted relevant and actually fulfilling my future job needs. So either the future jobs I'm going to need to implement and maintain these technologies that we're talking about. Vaclav referred to that before about, those who can understand the data and apply the data. So that might be a new job I need to add, that I can redeploy the folks who are being displaced into those future jobs. That kind of circle of life, if you will, that is sustainable automation. I automate, I identify who's at risk, I reskill and upskill and make that investment to keep them in my workforce and fulfill my future needs. And that what I just described, that circle is a financially justifiable circle as well. The cost savings from taking that action of reskilling and redeploying versus firing or making redundant, and then going and recruiting, and then trying to bring someone in, train them, get them into my culture, and actually get them productive. If you add all that up, and there's been plenty of studies on this, the cost statement is quite justifiable to invest in the learning needs so that I redeploy those workers across the workforce. So that's what we mean by sustainable automation, and something that, I've talked to a lot of large organizations who are also tying that off with sustainability goals from the UN and taking it up a much higher level that I'm ready to operate at. But really interesting to see that as well.
It almost seems as if, to me, that the growth of the organization, the innovation strategies, and then the personal development of the workers who have been with a company for a long time, they become parallel, and they themselves are sort of like fostering a culture of innovation and talent development. So thanks for that, Greg. Now, before we turn to our audience questions, I would like to ask each of you the top 3 soft skills that you believe personally that you believe must be the focus of any growth-oriented organization. Let's start with Vaclav.
Sure. I think it has already sort of transpired throughout the discussion. Communication is going to be number 1, I think, especially with the focus on remote communication and collaboration. Then emotional intelligence in all sorts of aspects, and leadership, if we want to consider leadership as a skill, or if you want to see it as a cluster of skills. There are many theories, but leadership and especially performance management in that sense, I think it's going to be very important in nowadays sort of new normal. Although I don't like that expression much.
Greg?
Yeah, look, I agree with the skills that the survey suggests and our respondents have told us. I think what I'd add to that is overlaying all those skills with a data and digital literacy flavor, if you will. And that's not hard skills. That's not how to code, right? This is applying digital and data literacy, and we saw digital fluency in the report itself, but applying it to each of those other skills. And one of my favorite stories in this topic maybe brings it to life. Working with a major bank here in Australia, and the CIO said, we're implementing RPA technology, that's voice AI effectively, that is going to displace call center workers. And so she came to HR and said, this is happening. These workers are going to be displaced. We need to work on where we're going to transition them. But she also said, hey, there's a new role I need to add to my workforce, though, in support of this program. And it's called a conversation engineer. And HR went, a what? I don't have that job in my library. I don't know what you're talking about. And then the CIO said, no problem. that conversation engineer, let me tell you what kind of skills they need. They need kind of STEM skills, STEAM. They need to understand artificial intelligence. Again, not code it, but understand how to interpret it, understand how to apply it in the business sense. But they also needed creative writing, creative thinking. And again, HR went, what? Where do I find that combination of skills? Because I'm used to going to this university, or I'm used to going to that industry or that company to kind of recruit from. And none of those places that I'm used to have that match of skill. And so I think what this said, and I can interpret this back to the survey results we got, is that HR, learning organizations, we have to look at the decades of kind of how we've done things in the past and tear it up, burn it down, start afresh. Because that way of thinking, where we used to source our skills, the jobs we used to hire for, the skills we used to look for, that is not going to solve this future state of being able to bring on conversation engineers, which, what do? They train the AI how to talk to us. They train the voice AI how to speak to us when I call the call center, how to interpret what I'm saying, how to pause for effect. So that's a very different environment, and we have to recognize that and kind of change with the times and come up with new methods for finding, sourcing, and also skilling our teams.
I'll let you in on a little secret, Greg. I used to be a conversation designer myself, so I understand like how to branch out the different responses. So thanks for sharing that. Let's turn to our audience questions. We have one from Jennifer Arnold, who asks, do you think higher education institutions in this region are preparing the future workforce with the new skills? And if not, how do you suggest companies engage and or partner with them to ensure that graduates come out with some level of core skills? I think Vaclav already touched on those, the discourse on institutional, the role of institutions. Who would like to take it up?
Since I already spared a few words, I will leave it to Greg. But I just want to say, I think the way how the question is tabled, I think, is leading towards. It's leading us towards saying no, there aren't. I would say that some are better than the others, and that's not only matter of Asia or a specific region or country. I think some schools are better than others in a way how they prepare their students for the future. But the overall problem persists. I think it's more matter of marketing. We as employers should do a good marketing towards what the education system, towards the group, which is the education system customers, which are students, but more importantly, their parents. I think that's the way how to turn it around. Once the parents start wanting the skills we need, then the schools will see the need to shift. Otherwise, there will be always a disconnect. That's my takeaway from the 22 plus years.
Yeah, thank you, Vaclav.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right, Buck. You kind of highlight something that many of these organizations, these higher ed organizations, are rooted in not decades, but like hundreds of years of doing it a particular way. And the tenured professors who have the say in what content gets, what courses get brought to life. And so I think the universities, however, there are a few bright sparks that are coming along. And I think the pandemic has caused more universities to shift their thinking on this because they've seen undergrads drop. And so they need to find new revenue streams. I think, we've worked with the likes of Deakin University out of Melbourne and University of New South Wales here in Sydney. And I think those successful universities have they've drawn a line between the existing undergrad programs, and they have built organizations that are specifically in place for corporate learning. So how do we go and drive a new revenue stream for us? But also, this is a big problem. We have the same dilemma in the existing workforce that we need to solve for. So those that have managed to do that, and some of them are using Faethm data that I showed you before, the future capability framework, to assess a workforce and then see where are there gaps in these data and digital literacies, soft skills, the core and communication and leadership skills. Where are there gaps so that I know what they are, and then build a curriculum. And this is a key challenge. Build a short course curriculum, because these corporates don't want to send their people on 3 or 4 year degree programs. They want to know those short courses that can execute against these capability gaps that we've identified. So again, that's a shift in thinking, but one that I think universities, and we're seeing signs that we're starting to accept and address and actually invest to go after this new demand in the markets.
Thanks, Greg. We have one more question from our audience. Mark Flores asks if companies recognize the importance of power skills. What do you think is the reason why they don't seem to be investing enough in building those skills? So there is another gap there. Let's start with Greg this time.
Oh, wait a second. I was ready for Vaclav to go first now.
Oh, okay.
No problem. No problem. I think this is an interesting phenomena, and I think actually the companies are still struggling with the pre-step, the previous step, sort of like there's. I think many of the companies are struggling with digitization and automation and implementing these skills. And then the power skills, then they will see there's a gap and they need to focus on the power skills. So it's a bit of a short-sightedness and a deficiency in what is actually preceding the power skills. That's what I think is the reason for this. Yeah.
Thanks,
yeah, that resonates with me. I think there's also I guess almost like cement shoes. How do I get the inertia to get going and to start? That the problem statement seems too big for me, and so we try and chunk this down into small bite-sized pieces. Again, back to the Verizon example. Get the data you need. First of all, where are you? Where's your current workforce? What skills do you have? So getting that assessment, so I know where I'm at. Now I can understand where I need to go and identify what are the biggest gaps, or the gaps that have the biggest impact on my business, so I know where to invest first. Because a lot of this is a challenge for you got limited dollars to spend in L&D. Where do I make sure that I don't get wastage and I spend it to the best outcome?
Thank you. Special thanks to Jennifer and Mark for posting their questions. And thank you also to Greg and Vaclav. Now, I have one final question for both of you. And in your opinion, it is about the biggest takeaway on power skills following today's conversation. So I'll start with Vaclav.
Yeah, I'm the one who kicks it off. I think my one big takeaway from this whole discussion is that we have many trends in the society nowadays, in the working space nowadays, that are actually driving a big skill shift, and we have to keep on mind that power skills are going to be more important than ever in the future, and it should not happen what the previous question was actually pointing towards, that we focus on the hard skills and implementation of the sort of cutting edge technology, and we forget about what's going to be next, what we'll be facing after. So that's my big takeaway.
Thank you, Vaclav. Greg?
Yeah, Vaclav, you're the pro. I'm always going to default to you, so that's why you go. Look, for me, I look at these skills we're talking about, and they are ultimately what truly makes us human. Many of these skills, right? And those are the things that are going to see us through any kind of transformation or disruption that comes our way. So that's what we need to be investing in. That's what people need to be focusing on, not just waiting for their companies, by the way, to focus on this, but themselves to focus on this. We can try and get government to help focus on it as well, but we know how long that might take. But I think all have a role to play. Ultimately, fueling these truly human skills and capabilities means that we won't be displaced by these technologies, because they are only going to increase in capability, and the exponential curve will only sharpen as we go forward. So this is not the end. This is kind of a new way of thinking about strategic workforce planning and the way we reskill and upskill our people to keep them, again, meaningfully employed. And it is our duty as employers, and I think as citizens, to make sure that happens.
So it's about fueling human skills. Now, for our listeners, the report actually includes an extensive array of power skills that you might want to take a closer look at. So we invite you to go ahead and download the report. So at this point, I would like to thank Greg and Vaclav for your insights. We would also like to thank our partner, Pearson, for the invaluable information they shared with us today, and that is in the report. Feel free to download a copy of the research study using the link provided. I believe it's in the chat somewhere there. And also, to our audience, don't forget to check out your inbox for upcoming events and other virtual learning sessions like this one today. So again, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Vaclav. Any other parting words?
No, thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Vaclav.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
So it's also been a pleasure for me hosting you all. I am Rachel Reynosa, and I wish everyone a great day ahead wherever you are. Thanks and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Cheers.
you.